Hello and welcome to my home studio. My name is Chris Vaughn, and I'm the clay studio manager at Burlington City Arts, broadcasting and recording from my home studio in Essex Junction as we all sort of socially quarantine and try to figure out how to keep art as part of our sort of daily and weekly routines. Um, whether you are part of the BCA Clay Studio community, whether you're connected with BCA in some other way, whether you are brand new to clay, thinking about taking a class when your local studio reopens, or just looking for something to do on a Sunday afternoon, however you found yourself watching here, thanks for tuning in, and thank you so much for staying home. So I've got three different plates I'm going to make today, two different styles. One is thrown like a cylinder. Uh, One is sort of a really great, quick, easy plate and also a good starting place for sets. And the third is just a larger, sort of halfway between a big plate and a platter, just a large sort of serving plate. Um, with that in mind, let's throw some plates. Today I'll be working with Laguna's number 90 clay. It's a red foam fixed body. It's got some grog in it, which is really nice to be able to sort of stand up, have some foundation. That grog is not going to break down with water. So it's got the number 90 clay I love for larger pieces, wider forms, things that benefit from having some extra support underneath it. I'm also throwing on the blue 12-inch speedball bats. If there, there's a handful of different bats out there made from different materials. If you are throwing on a non-porous bat, you are gonna want to make sure that that's clean, but then dry. So you're gonna treat your non-porous plastic bats just like you would the wheelhead. Okay, so for this plate, we're gonna throw it like a cylinder. So that means we're gonna center to a rough draft of a cylinder. So a very short, wide hockey puck. In the first week that we covered basic cylinders to turn into cups and mugs, we talked about centering to a hockey puck shape. Same goes for this style plate. It's just going to be a much wider centered ball of clay. And in centering, I'm really using all this part of my hand, driving down my lower fingers, this part of my left hand, boxing or fencing the clay in from the sort of span from maybe 9, 10 o'clock on the wheel down to 7. And my right hand is helping drive the left hand down. From here, I'm using the fist, the side of my right fist, to sort of pull the clay out. And my left hand again comes back to this trap or box or fence in the clay so the outside does not get too squirrely. When my piece of clay is well centered, I'm going to drill down, keeping in mind I don't have much space to go, much distance to go. But just like any other cylinder, we are going to drill a hole in it. This form is going to begin with a pot that has volume to it. Just like any other cylinder, I'm going to open it up. I'm going to use my right hand to support the work my left is doing. And I'm trying to plane out a floor. I want to keep as straight parallel to the bat and the wheelhead as possible. I also like to hook my pinky a little bit over this band of clay just to keep compression on the entire way out toward the rim. And this step really asks a lot of the clay, pushing and stretching, putting a lot of force on it. And so it drinks up the water that I'm giving it. So as a reminder, when throwing plates, especially through the centering and the opening, you'll want to go back and get more water from times along the way. Anytime your clay starts feeling dry, sticky, anything like that, you want to get some more water on there. You can always just let go. What I'm looking for here is this pocket, this little corner or trench that develops. That is going to be the place where my food surface sort of ends, and the rim, that space to sort of add in decorative components, and also retaining everything on the plate. That's that corner. That's what I'm looking for. Same goes for a cylinder. Sometimes it's just easier to see on a plate. It's right there. There's no having to look down again. Before I go any further, I'm going to do a heavy compression on the rim and try to keep that slightly conical. Just like with any form, we are working against the physics of centrifugal force. We want to make sure that we make that fight as easy as possible to win. So keeping the form slightly tapered in helps prevent things from sort of splaying out over the course of the piece. With that set up, I'm going to switch over to a rib. I've got a flat edge wooden rib, and I'm going to hold that right at 3 o'clock, sort of fan so that the edge points away from me, and I'm going to compress. I'm trying to get even pressure across the whole span of the rib, and this is really strengthening the floor of the plate and also planing it flat so that when it comes time to eat from the plate, it's nice and easy. Good surface to scoop and poke and cut on. With the floor or the food surface of the plate compressed and planed flush, I'm going to move to the rim. So I'm going to slow my wheel down a little and do a series of pulls and compressions. I'm trying to gain some height. The idea with this plate is that what is currently a vertical rim will splay out to become a more horizontal or angled rim. My right hand is staying as the driver here, and I'm tapering the pull toward the center. Again, just getting out ahead of the effects of centrifugal force. Okay, so if I were to stop here, I'd essentially have a short casserole or ramekin shape. Next, I'm going to skip ahead to my plastic knife step. Typically, this is something that happens later on, right before it comes off the wheel. But knowing that this rim is going to sort of flare out, that space that I'd be cutting is going to become inaccessible. So I'm going to take my wood knife, I'm holding that at 3 o'clock, and I'm going to cut away some of that excess clay. I'm also setting myself up for trimming by leaving a really nice symmetrical circle. Okay, and at this point, we're going to make the switch from casserole or ramekin or basic cylinder shape to a plate. So I've got my flat-sided rib in the left hand. My right hand is supporting from the outside. A little more water on there. I just want the outside of the plate to really coast through my hands. I don't want any catching. So if it starts to feel sticky, again, get a little bit more water. And holding the rib right around 3 o'clock. I'm putting pressure on the rim my right hand is supporting as that drops. And I'll go back and do another pass with that. And right here, my right fingers are going to do a little bit of a pull against the rib, just to even things out some. I could feel that there was a bit of extra weight down at the bottom toward the base of the rim, toward the bottom section of the rim. So that little pull just helped even things somewhat, take care of some of the trimming work I'd have to do later. And I'm gonna now start this sort of delicate dance between how much pressure, how much downward pressure I can apply to the rim before it flops, and how flat I can get the rim so that it stays more of a plate and doesn't dry up upward into a bowl shape. And I can feel that this one does not have much further it's willing to go. So from here, I'm going to take my plastic chamois just to soften and touch up the rim. I'm going to go over this little corner. Looking ahead to this as a finished plate, I know that I'm going to I've got a specific plan in it that includes an all-over glaze of the same color. After that step where I had dropped the rim, looking ahead, if I had planned for something that had a one color food surface and another color or some sort of decorative elements on the rim, that'd be an opportunity where I could go back in with the 90-degree corner on the wooden rib and really accentuate the spot where the food surface ends and the rim begins. It's a great technique to looking ahead to color blocking for your glaze or sgraffito, any sort of surface decoration work. Okay, so one of the questions that came in over the week was how to get plates off the wheel, or off the bat rather. So I'm gonna just check to see that my wire is wide enough. And actually, for this one, I'm gonna end up taking the splash pan off, backing it up some. And this is nobody's favorite part of pottery, but especially when working on a non-porous surface, a non-porous bat, sort of a necessary evil. So I've got my wire held tight, and my thumbs are going to be pushing down the whole time. I'll just take this all the way off. I'm going to fit this in on the back side. I'm holding really tight and do one spin of the wheel. And from there, this is just going to set up to leather hard right on the bat. But it is important on a non-porous bat that you do wire it off. So while I get this set back up, let's quickly talk about the next plate. So our first plate was thrown like a cylinder, really good for creating plates that are intended to serve dishes, intended to serve foods and dishes that have a juice or a sauce or a liquid component to them. You can really tailor how voluminous the plate is, how much it will sort of hold onto by the angle you set that rim. This plate is typically going to be better for sort of a dry food. It's a great sandwich, lunch plate, dessert plate. They're also a really great starting place for sets. They're also a great plate if you are somebody who doesn't love centering. I'm going to move our chat window down a little. So this, again, is the Laguna number 90. I'm going to be working that clay throughout the day. This is a 2.5 pound ball. And I'm not going to worry too much about the centering on this one. This plate is going to be thrown, I like to call it, our first one is thrown inside out. This one's going to be an outside in. So I want to get it loosely centered. I don't want any real serious twists in there. But one of the challenges in centering for plates is that it's great on the coning up, and then as you cone down and it gets wide, you get a little bit of a wiggle or a wobble in there. Kind of like the camera just did. With this one, we're not going to have to worry too much about that because we're not going to be drilling down. So if the core of the clay is not perfectly centered, it's not going to really impact. Because I'm not drilling down, I also want to center this shallower, thinner than my first one. Oh, and I've got an air bubble. My little trick for air bubbles is to pop 2 of them from 2 sides. And even though we're not going to drill down like we did in the first plate, we are going to use a rib to really compress this. Strengthen the clay, tighten up all the particle structure, make sure it's really strong clay. And if the outer edge gets a little off center, again, no worries. So I mentioned at the top that this is a really great form to begin working on sets of plates because the next step is going to be to cut some of the outside off to ensure that we do have a perfect circular disc. So we can go from piece to piece measuring that to make sure that the disc we cut is the same throughout the however many plates you want to make. So I'm going to cut a little rim off the outside. And then measure that. So I know for next plate, if I were to continue with a set of these, I want to cut to a 9-inch disc each piece. So this form goes from a flat disc to a plate very quickly. I'm going to wet my right hand. It's going to stay on top of the form. My left hand is going to stay on top. My left thumb is hanging out on the outer edge. My right hand is going to come in, and my fingernails are going to glide along the bat and scoop up. So I'm separating the clay from the bat right on the outer edge, and that draws up and becomes the rim. And from here, I can do a little pull to flatten this back out some, a little compression, and really that's all there is to it. This, like I said, is a really quick plate. It's going to tend to be shallower. It's going to be better suited for drier foods. But it's a fun plate, and it can be scaled to really any size. As a last step, I'm just going to go over to resurface. Get this really nice and smooth. I've been liking this red rib from Mud Tools a lot recently. So even though we did our plastic knife, wooden knife cutting step properly. I'm going to give that another pass right now. After going in to scoop the rim up, inevitably that's no longer symmetrical. So I'm going to take a little bit of that excess away just to give me something to trim to, and wiring this off is going to be the same. I'm going to hold this really tight, thumbs pushing down on the wire, and one turn of the wheel. Our last plate for the day is going to be thrown like the first one. It's going to be thrown as a cylinder. And it is 6 pounds of clay. So just a bit bigger. I might treat it a little bit more carefully, getting it stuck onto the wheel. Hitting with some downward pressure. And then once it's stuck, we're going to center this as normal. Just focus a bit more on coning up and coning down. So as I'm coning up and drawing the clay up, I can feel the twists and knots in it start to draw up as the clay gets narrower. All the inconsistency is more easily felt. And at that point, I can sort of just use more brute force to trap the clay and force it to center itself. And then on the way down, I find coning down straight from a straight vertical to be pretty challenging. So I like to take the clay out of axis and pushing it slightly toward 12 o'clock. So my right hand is sort of torquing it forward. My left hand is wrapped over, applying some downward pressure. And something about bringing it out of axis, as it comes back down, it just sort of sucks itself back into center. It's a really strange. It seems like, I don't know why the clay does that, but it does it, and I'll take it. But I don't really know how to explain why it does it. So for this one, I am going to pay more attention to the end-centered shape. So my left hand is more involved here to keep everything sort of centered and stable on the outer edge. And my right hand and wrist are coming into play, just driving down from above and sort of stretching the clay outward. Tidy at the outside edge, outside rim. And from here, I know I don't have much clay to work with, so I'm going to sort of combine drilling down with opening up. Again, I've got my pinky of my right hand sort of hooked over the spot that we're pulling out. Add some compression. I find that if I don't have that downward compression, that I end up losing a little band of clay here. My rim is sort of splitting a little bit, so I'm just going to do a very heavy compression to tidy that all back up. And I'm going to try to close it off back to that conical shape that we had in the first plate so that I can move back into the center and deal with compression and planing of the food surface. So I'll go back to my wooden rib. And I'm holding that at about 3, 4 o'clock. Fan out away from me so that the flat edge is engaged with the clay. I've got my 90-degree corner of the rib as close to the center spot of the plate as I can get without it snagging. And from here, I'll go into my pulls. Outside hand is really engaged, driving the clay back up toward the center. And I'm going to do a compression for every pull. I think this is going to be the last pull on this one. I don't think there's that much more clay to really move, but also at some point the rim would get disproportionate from the food surface. So I'll switch to the plastic knife, cut away some of this excess. I like these mud sharks. Sometimes on wider forms or wider plates, it's hard to get the needle tool down in there. This needle part pivots, so I can get this down in right next to the wheel head. Okay, and taking our casserole ramekin shape and bring it to a plate. Again, we're going to set up a flat edge rib right at about 3 o'clock, holding in the left hand. My right hand is supporting from the outside, and I'm applying some steady outward, downward pressure on the rim using the entire surface of the rib. So just to skip back to our first plate, this spot is what I had been talking about as where we could go back in with this corner to really accentuate where food surface ends and rim begins. If I wanted to color block or do surface decoration, I could sort of plan ahead with that. But again, I think for this one, I'm gonna be looking ahead to a smoother transition. From here, I'm gonna get my plastic chamois. I might try to bring this just a bit further down, but I know I don't have much more of a tolerance between the plate and the wheel head, or sorry, the splash pan. So I'm gonna go ahead and remove that now. I know I'm gonna have to anyways, and I know at this point, I really don't wanna use much more water. At this point, if I introduce much more water into the rim, I am very likely going to have that flop. Doesn't mean I won't do it without more water. I'm going to try to bring this just a bit flatter. And again, I'm using my lower fingers to push up the outside of the rim, doing a really gentle pull against the rib. And for this one, I'm going to add in just some surface decoration. This has been thrown pretty tight and symmetrical. I want to make this, I want to keep my rim symmetrical to make trimming easy. But I do want to add back in a little bit of wonkiness to give this plate some character. Now I've got some inconsistencies in the rim. It'll play nicely with the glaze, but at the same time, I've got a symmetrical exterior that will set itself up for trimming really well. So with this one, I'm actually going to wait a little while, let it stiffen up somewhat before I go back in with the wire. It's going to be important that I do wire it before it gets too hard that I can't make that cut, or before it dries too much that it starts shrinking and makes itself susceptible to cracking. But I know just from going back over with the plastic chamois there that this needs some time to stiffen up before it will tolerate a wire going underneath it. So the nice thing about working on a bat is you can just pick it up, move on to the next piece, and revisit to wire it off when the timing is right. So that is throwing plates for today. Thanks for joining. If you're watching after the fact, thanks for checking out our lesson. If you have feedback, ideas for more classes, techniques you'd like to see demonstrated, please reach out to me either through my Burlington City Arts email or on Instagram at Chris_throws_pots. Again, thanks for watching, and thank you for staying home.